Welcome to Crime in Court. This is the Delphi transcript read through. We just recently, just yesterday, got the transcripts for the Delphi trial, and we are going to be reading through them. My goal is to try to be giving you daily snippets from the trial and slowly we'll get through it all. Today we're going to be going through the opening statements. We're going to do the state and the defense. The state's opening defense or opening statement was very brief. I think it was only about like 10-15 minutes. So we're going to read through that and also the defense's opening statement, which is a lot lengthier, but I think it's a lot better. If you've been on my channel at all, I am totally in the belief that Richard Allen is innocent. He was likely framed by law enforcement and potentially Judge Gull's in on it too with everything that we've seen in this case. So it's just there's he's also been tortured and the state to get confessions. So we're going to read through and see how this plays out as best we can without actual video. We have the transcript and we're going to get through it. So please hit that like button. Make sure you are subscribed so that you don't miss any of these episodes from or streams regarding the transcript. So let's get started. Thank you guys again for being here. I wanted to start off. Whoops, what happened to it? They had some housekeeping items here, but I just wanted to start off. Okay, that's what I thought it was. So on the record, um, the date is October 18th, 2024, and they had some housekeeping items here and without the jury. I'm just going to start when the jury starts. All right, so the bailiff says, "All rise." The jury enters the room at 9:21 a.m. The bailiff says, "Thank you, you may be seated." The court says, "Thank you, Jason and Jeremy," who must be the court officers. "Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to see you this morning. I hope you traveled down and stay. I hope your travel down and your stay last night was pleasant enough." They were sequestered, if you don't remember. So the jury members had to be uh, sequestered away into their hotel room the previous night. I hope your travel down and your stay was pleasant enough considering what it is that we are here all assembled to do. You have in your possession a folder. Inside that folder is several pads of paper and pens for the purpose of taking notes and for asking questions. At the conclusion of the day, just leave those materials there on your chairs. Jody, she's the court reporter, I believe, or the court clerk. Sorry. She's the one that like everyone's been writing to get the transcripts, and she's given them every excuse under the sun as to why they weren't ready. But thanks to people like Criminality, who she created like a link so that everybody could crowdsource this, and other creators did uh fundraisers and things like that. I donated because I wanted to get these, and I've been waiting for them. As you know, October 18th was quite a ways away, and usually transcripts I don't think take this long, especially for the length of trial that it was. Anyways, so she says Jody will collect those and lock them up with her things. So she'll collect your notepads and pens. She doesn't look at anything. She just will lock those up and make sure that you have what you need for the balance of the trial. You may take your folders with you when you take our breaks and over the noon hour, but you will need to leave them here over the evening recess. I apologize for a little bit of a delay. I'd hoped to get started right at 9 o'clock. There were a couple of housekeeping matters that I needed to attend to. These attorneys have been here waiting and ready to go, so I apologize for the brief delay. I try to keep jurors advised of what it is that we're going to be doing. So, the next step in the proceedings is the court will read its preliminary instructions. I have provided to you copies of those instructions. You may follow along as I read those, if you wish. Once I'm done, the attorneys will make their opening statements. The state will present its statement first, and then the defendant will present his opening statement, after which the state will begin to present its case. Again, I've provided copies of those to you, and you may follow along if you wish. This is a criminal case brought by the state of Indiana against Richard Allen. The case was commenced when informations were filed charging the defendant with count 1 felony murder, a felony, count 2 felony murder, a felony, count 3 murder, a felony, and count 4 murder, a felony. What's the difference? Okay. Those informations, omitting formal parts, reads as follows. Count 1, on February 13th, 2017, in Carroll County, Indiana, Richard Allen did kill another human being, to wit, Abigail Williams, while committing or attempting to commit kidnapping. I'm not going to refrain from saying their names. We all know their names, and why it's redacted in these is, I get it, they're minors, but we all know who the victims are. Anyone can do a Google search. So I don't know who they're protecting, but okay. So Richard Allen did take the life of Abigail Williams while committing or attempting to commit kidnapping. Count 2, on February 13th, 2017, in Carroll County, Indiana, Richard Allen did kill another human being, to wit, Liberty German, while committing or attempting to commit kidnapping. Count 3, on February 13th, 2017, in Carroll County, Indiana, Richard Allen did knowingly or intentionally kill another human being, to wit, Abby Williams. Count 4, on February 13th, 2017, in Carroll County, Indiana, Richard Allen did knowingly or intentionally kill another human being, to wit, Libby German. The crime of murder is defined by law as follows: a person who kills another human being while committing or attempting to commit kidnapping commits felony murder, a felony. Before you may convict the defendant, the state must prove each of the following beyond a reasonable doubt. 1. The defendant, Richard M. Allen, 2. Killed 3. Abby Williams, 4, while committing or attempting to commit kidnapping, which is defined as a person who knowingly or intentionally removes another person by force or threat of force from one place to another. If the state fails to prove each of these elements beyond a reasonable doubt, you must find the defendant not guilty. If the state does prove each of these elements beyond a reasonable doubt, you may find the defendant guilty of count 1, felony murder, a felony. The crime of murder is defined by law as follows: a person who kills another human being while committing or attempting to commit kidnapping commits felony murder, a felony. Before you can convict the defendant, the state must prove each of the following beyond a reasonable doubt. 1. The defendant, Richard Allen. 2. Killed. 3. Libby German. 4. While committing or attempting to commit kidnapping, which is defined as a person who knowingly or intentionally removes another person by force or threat of force from one place to another. If the state fails to prove each of these elements beyond a reasonable doubt, you must find that the defendant is not guilty. If the state does prove each of these elements beyond a reasonable doubt, you may find the defendant guilty of count 2, felony murder, a felony. The crime of murder is defined by law as follows: a person who knowingly or intentionally kills another human being commits murder, a felony. Before you may convict the defendant, the state must prove each of the following beyond a reasonable doubt. 1. The defendant, Richard Allen. 2. Knowingly or intentionally. 3. Killed. 4. Abby Williams. If the state fails to prove each of these elements beyond a reasonable doubt, you must find the defendant not guilty. These are very confusing, and I don't understand the difference between the felony murder charge versus just the murder charge, which is also a felony. So I'm so confused, but okay. If the state does prove each of these elements, you may find the defendant guilty of count 3, murder, a felony. Again, the crime of murder is defined by law as follows: a person who knowingly or intentionally kills another human being commits murder, a felony. Before you may convict the defendant, the state must prove each of the following beyond a reasonable doubt. 1. The defendant, Richard Allen. 2. Knowingly or intentionally. 3. Killed. 4. Libby German. If the state fails to prove each of these elements beyond a reasonable doubt, you must find the defendant not guilty. If the state does prove each of these elements beyond a reasonable doubt, you may find the defendant guilty of count 4, murder, a felony. The defendant has entered pleas of not guilty, and the burden rests upon the state of Indiana to prove to each of you beyond a reasonable doubt every essential element of the crimes charged. The charges which have been filed are the formal method of bringing the defendant to trial. The fact that charges have been filed, the defendant arrested, and brought to trial is not to be considered by you as any evidence of guilt. That is something that people often tend to do. Just, just the fact that someone was arrested, a lot of people tend to think, oh, well, they must be guilty of something. Under the law of this state, a person charged with a crime is presumed to be innocent. To overcome the presumption of innocence, the state must prove the defendant guilty of each essential element of the crimes charged beyond a reasonable doubt. If the evidence lends itself to two reasonable interpretations, you must choose the interpretation consistent with the defendant's innocence. If there is only one reasonable interpretation, you must accept that interpretation and consider the evidence with all the other evidence in the case in making your decision. That's kind of an important sentence there that I think may have been overlooked by the jurors here, because if there are two possible reasonable ways to believe that the situation played out, one close to the defendant's version and then one closer to the state, you still have to go with the defense. You have to lean towards the defense. And I don't think that that was, I definitely don't think that the state proves their burden, but we'll see how it goes because we know that the defense was very, very, very limited. They couldn't bring in third party suspect testimony. They couldn't bring in stuff with, anything that had to do with the Franks memo, the Odinism, all of that was denied by Gull. Also, the geofence data that showed that Richard Allen wasn't in the vicinity in that time frame when the state is saying that the girls' lives were taken, when in reality there were actually he wasn't there, his phone wasn't there, and in reality there were actually other people there that never were investigated. So this is kind of a key important thing, but we know that the defense was very limited in what they could bring for their defense. So they had to focus on the timeline and things like that, which is actually not a bad strategy because if you try to sell the Franks memo to a jury, you're going to get people that push back and say, what? I don't believe the defense because look at how, the public took it. You get mixed reaction when something like that comes out, understandably, because it's kind of something hard for the mind to understand that there could be so much evil out there, and that evil could actually be, I don't know, law enforcement, people that are supposed to be protecting us. Anyways, moving on. The defendant is not required to present any evidence to prove his innocence or to prove or explain anything. The state has the burden of proving the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Some of you may have served as jurors in civil cases where you were told it is necessary to prove that fact is more likely true than not true. In criminal cases, the state's proof must be more powerful than that. It must be beyond a reasonable doubt. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is proof that leaves you firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt. There are a few things in this world that we know with absolute certainty, and in criminal cases, the law does not require proof that overcomes every possible doubt. If Based on your consideration of the evidence, you are firmly convinced the defendant's guilty of the crimes charged, you may find him guilty. If, on the other hand, you think there is a real possibility that he is not guilty, you should give him the benefit of the doubt and find him not guilty. The burden is upon the state to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of the crimes charged. It is a strict and heavy burden. The evidence must overcome any reasonable doubt concerning the defendant's guilt, but it does not mean that the defendant's guilt must be proved beyond all possible doubt. A reasonable doubt is a fair, actual, and logical doubt based upon reason and common sense. A reasonable doubt may arise from either the evidence or from a lack of evidence. Reasonable doubt, like the lack of any evidence tying Richard Allen to the scene, except for a gun that, or a shell casing, sorry, that they claim is his, but it's, I beg to differ. Anyways, any reasonable doubt may arise from either the evidence or a lack of evidence. Reasonable doubt exists when you are not firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt after you have weighed and considered all of the evidence. A defendant must not be convicted on suspicion or speculation. It is not enough for the state to show that the defendant is probably guilty. The state must prove each element of the crimes by evidence that firmly convinced each of you and leaves no reasonable doubt. The proof must be so convincing that you can rely and act upon it in this matter of the highest importance. You are the exclusive judges of this evidence, the credibility of the witnesses, and of the weight to be given the testimony of each of them. In considering the testimony of any witness, you may take into account his or her ability and opportunity to observe, the manner and conduct of the witness while testifying, any interest, bias or prejudice the witness may have, any relationship with other witnesses or interested parties, and the reasonableness of the testimony of the witness considered in light of all the evidence in the case. You should attempt to fit the evidence to the presumption that the defendant is innocent and the theory that every witness is telling the truth. You should not disregard the testimony of any witness without a reason and without careful consideration. If you find conflicting testimony, you must determine which of the witnesses you will believe and which of them you will disbelieve. In weighing the testimony to determine what or whom you will believe, you should use your own knowledge, experience, and common sense gained from day to day living. The number of witnesses who testify to a particular fact or the quantity of evidence on a particular point need not control your determination of the truth. You should give the greatest weight to that evidence which convinces you most strongly of its truthfulness. During the progress of the trial, certain questions may be asked and certain exhibits may be offered which the court rules are not admissible into evidence. You mustn't concern yourselves for the reasons for those rulings, since the production of evidence is strictly controlled by rules of law. You mustn't consider an exhibit or testimony which the court orders stricken from the record. In fact, such matter is to be treated as though you never heard it, which is almost impossible. Nothing that I say during trial is intended as any suggestion of what facts or verdicts you should find. Each of you, as jurors, must determine the facts and the verdicts. The evidence must be judged and considered from your memories of the testimony of the witnesses and such exhibits as may be admitted for your examination. You may take notes during the trial if you wish. Do not become so involved in note taking that you fail to carefully listen to the evidence or to observe the witnesses as they testify. Transcripts of witness testimony will not be available to you during your deliberation, so please pay careful attention during the testimony. Notes are not evidence in this case and mustn't take precedence over your independent recollection of the evidence. They are only an aid to recollection and are not entitled to any greater weight than your recollection or impression as to the actual evidence. Your notes should not be disclosed to anyone other than a fellow juror during deliberations. Do not take your notes outside of the court or the jury room. The court has furnished you with paper and pens. You are allowed to submit questions, so they can submit questions. to witnesses to clarify their testimony during trial under certain conditions. If you feel the answer to your question would be helpful in understanding the case, please raise your hand after the attorneys have completed their examinations but before the witness is excused. You must write your question down and hand it to the bailiff. I will then privately confer with the attorneys about your question, and I will make a ruling on whether your question may be asked under our law. If the question is of the type that is allowed, I will address the question to the witness. Please do not directly speak to the court, the lawyers, or the witnesses, but carefully follow this procedure if you wish to have a specific question addressed to a witness. Your verdicts must represent the considered judgment of each juror. In order to return a verdict of guilty or not guilty, you must all agree. After you return your verdicts, you are under no obligation to discuss them or the reasons for them with anyone. And we have not heard from any jurors that. Oh, wait, no, you know what? I take that back. I think Murder Sheet did, may have done a post verdict interview with the juror, but that may be the only one. And how to verify that with them because they're such slime bags and they lie about everything. So I wouldn't even take it as true, to be honest. If they did do, my memory, I never listened to it because I couldn't take listening to another episode of theirs. I just can't. And I've only listened to like a couple in my lifetime. They're just awful to listen to. Anyways, so the trial of the case will proceed as follows. First, the attorneys will have an opportunity to make opening statements. These statements are not evidence and should be considered only as a preview of what the attorneys expect the evidence will be. Following the opening statements, witnesses will be called to testify. They will be placed under oath and questioned by the attorneys. Documents and other tangible exhibits may also be received as evidence. If an exhibit is given to you to examine, you should examine it carefully, individually, and without comment. When the evidence is completed, the attorneys may make final statements. These final statements are not evidence, but are given to assist you in evaluating the evidence. The attorneys are permitted to argue, to characterize the evidence, and to attempt to persuade you to a particular verdict. You may accept or reject these arguments as you see fit. Finally, just before you retire to consider your verdicts, I will give you further instructions on the law which applies to this case. During the trial, there will be periods of time during which you will be allowed to separate, such as a recess for rest and overnight. When you're outside the jury room, you mustn't discuss the case among yourselves or with anyone else. However, you may, this is baffling to me. However, you may discuss the evidence with your fellow jurors during recesses from trial when all of you are present, as long as you reserve judgment about the outcome of the case until deliberations. So even before they begin deliberating, they can talk with one another about the case, which is unheard of. I've never heard of this before. Is this common in Indiana or is this a Judge Gull thing? I don't know. It gives them the opportunity to start talking about it and forming opinions, which they're not supposed to do until the end. If anyone makes any, well, I mean, everybody, we all make opinions as we listen to the evidence, but when you start to like have the conversations with other people, you're influenced, you could be influenced by other people. And I don't think that this is appropriate. If anyone makes any attempt to talk to you concerning the case, you should report the fact to the court immediately. Until your jury service is complete while you are outside of the courtroom or the jury room, you may not use computers, laptops, cell phones, or electronic devices or any other method to conduct research on your own or as a group regarding the case, to gather information about the issues in the case, to investigate the case, conduct experiments, or attempt to gain any specialized knowledge about the case, to receive assistance in deciding the case from any outside window, to read, excuse me, to read, watch, or listen to anything about the case from any source, to listen to discussions among or receive information from other people about the case. This is very lengthy. I mean, they want to cover everything. Or talk to the parties, the lawyers, any of the witnesses or members of the media, or anyone else about this case, including posting information, text messaging, email, internet chat rooms, blogs, and social websites. During the trial, you mustn't consume any alcohol or drugs that would affect your ability to hear the evidence fairly and impartially. You should keep an open mind and not reach a judgment about the outcome of this case until you've heard all of the evidence, the arguments of counsel, and the final instructions on the law, and you begin your deliberations. First, then, uh, for opening statements is Mr. McLeland. And Mr. McLeland says, "Thank you, Your Honor. Judge, I apologize." The court says, "That's all right." He says, "I'm having technical difficulties regarding the start of the trial, or already at the start of the trial. Not a good start, not a good way to start. I understand. I believe he was trying to play the bridge guy video, which he did eventually get to play, but he was having technical difficulties trying to get it to run. So I find it kind of like I chuckle inside thinking about him struggling with the technology because he deserves it because he railroaded an innocent man, in my opinion, or had a big part in it. So the judge says, "Not a problem. Look how nice she is to McLeland. Not a problem. We have all struggled with technology." He says, "I appreciate that, Judge. Thank you." Court says, "Do you need Randy to come in here?" "I think we need just a moment, Your Honor." "Okay." The court may not, but okay. So he figures it out eventually, or he just gets started without it, and he begins his opening statement. And he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties. I was hoping to show you a video, but it's not going to work out. A few short days ago, I told you this case was about a bridge guy, or about Bridge Guy, a bullet, and the brutal murder of two young girls." Really briefly, a few short days ago, I believe that he's referring to, so during their jury voir dire, at some point, I know they were able to do like little mini opening statements. So I think that's probably what he's talking about. Like when they probably swore all the jurors in and stuff, they probably did their mini openings after that. All right. So he says that this case is about Bridge Guy, a bullet, and a brutal murder of two young girls. Now it is time for you to hear the rest of the story. How Richard Allen murdered Abby and Libby. I want to take you back to February 13th of 2017, a day where everything changed for Abby Williams and Liberty German. As we told you before, it was unseasonably warm that day in Carroll County. It was a nice summer day in the middle of winter, hint of spring, which was just around the corner. On top of that, Abby and Libby had a day off of school, so they decided to go out to the trails, specifically out to the Monon High Bridge, to be outside, enjoy nature, enjoy the weather, enjoy their day off of school. Now, I told you before the trails are a trail system in Delphi. These are trails that wind through the city. They go through various wooded areas and they go along and across streams, rivers, and creeks. The Monon High Bridge is an abandoned train trestle. It's 60 feet above the Deer Creek. So the girls headed out to the trails. They asked Kelsey German to go with them. She wasn't able to. However, she was able to give them a ride. On the way to the trails, Libby German snapped pictures of her and Abby Williams, sorry, and Abby Williams in the back seat of Kelsey's car, laughing and joking. Kelsey dropped the two girls off at the entrance of the trails. What is known, uh, the entrance of the trails that is known as Mears Entrance. The name of the entrance is Mears Entrance. The entrance goes along the property of the Mears family, owned by the Mears family. Okay. So everyone in this community refers to it as the Mears entrance. They entered into the trails through this entrance and they headed towards the Monon High Bridge. I want to tell you a little bit about Abby and Libby. First of all, from hearing me in court and hearing me speak, you know they commonly go by Abby and Libby, what they're commonly referred to. I mean, their full names are Abigail Williams Liberty German, so they go by Abby and Libby. They were best friends. They were always together. They were really more like sisters than friends. To put it into perspective, out of the two of them, only Libby had a phone. This might be a lie. But Libby and Abby's fingerprint put in her phone, uh, Libby had Abby's fingerprint put in her phone so that Abby could use it anytime she wanted. And it is believed that Abby may have had a phone with her that might have been an extra phone that was part of the German household that she was using that day. Not really sure, but there were probably two phones found at the crime scene that we never really found out more about. Anyways, they both were also students at Delphi Middle School, so they hung out together. They went to school together. They did everything together. They were best friends. As they went down the trail, Libby was on her phone, like most teenagers. She was talking to friends, texting family. She was on Snapchat. She was able to look at pictures from other friends posting her own pictures. And I know everyone knows what Snapchat is, but it's an app you have on your phone where you take a picture and you can post it online. The picture's up for a period of time and then it disappears. It's a pretty popular app for kids in this community. She did that as Abby Williams and her walked down the trail down towards the Monon High Bridge. I want to tell you a little bit about the bridge. Now, I had hoped the video was going to show the bridge, and maybe I'll be able to show you a video of it later, but it's a very high bridge, it's a very old bridge, and it's a very long bridge. Once you're on the bridge, how many more times can he say bridge? Once you're on the bridge, there's nowhere to go. There's no rails. There's only a few platforms in certain places. If you had to escape and you were on the bridge, you'd have nowhere to go but to jump off. The railroad ties that hold together the bridge are falling apart. Some are broken, some are loose. Heck, even some of them are missing altogether. It's scary to cross and it's flat out dangerous. But again, as I told you a few days ago, middle school and high school kids in our community love to cross this bridge, mostly just to say they did it. Why are you allowing them to? Close it off. Like that's a you problem. That's the adult in the community's problem. Like they need to do something to make it non-accessible, no longer accessible to the kids in the community if it's dangerous, or fix it up. But I digress. He says, though, I even did it when I was in high school. As they cross the bridge, Libby continues to use her phone, continues to take pictures and post them to Snapchat, takes a photo of Abby Williams, posted on Snapchat. As they crossed the bridge, Libby went first and Abby followed. As Libby got to the end of the bridge, she waited for Abby. Libby continued to play on her phone. But as she got to the end, she looked back and she noticed a man was following Abby Williams, showing inside Libby German's and something inside Libby German told her that she needed to get her phone out and film that man following Abby. At 2:30 at 2:13 p.m. is when she did that. We all know this is the 2:13 43-second video of bridge guy who you don't see his face and he looks a lot taller in the video than he does in the images that were released and a lot blurrier by the way too. The man follows Abby off the bridge to where Libby is standing. He then pulls out a gun and orders both of the girls down the hill. Sir, I don't know what video you were watching, but this didn't happen. Those chilling words, girls down the hill. They complied against their will, and as this happens, the video of Abby's phone cuts off, or Libby's phone cuts off. Imagine 13 and 14 years old, you're with your best friend, the weather's beautiful, you're off of school, you decide to have some fun. You go to the trails and cross the bridge, a local challenge in our community. While you're doing that, you're laughing, you're joking, you're posting pictures on Snapchat, but as you end the bridge, you notice a man following you. You get that chill, that feeling that when you that that feeling that you have when something isn't right. You pull your phone out and you took the video of the man. As you do, your friend runs to your aid. Didn't look like that. Looked like she was just glad to get off of the scary bridge in the video, but that's just my opinion. The man approaches, pulls a gun. We never see that. So I don't know where he's getting this, but he says he sees a gun and orders you and your friend down the hill. Imagine the fear you would have. A gun pointed at you, being ordered down the hill against your will. Out of fear, the girls complied. They complied with his orders, not knowing what he wanted or what he was going to do. Completely powerless. He had the power and the fear and forced them down the hill. The person I'm picturing this whole time is Ron Logan, not Richard Allen. So as they're as they're saying all of this, I'm seeing Ron Logan in my head. He had the power and the fear and forced them down the hill. Later that day, Derek German, father of Libby, arrives at the trail to pick up the girls. But the girls are nowhere to be found. He calls other family members to assist, but no one can locate the girls. The police are called and a search is started. The search ensues for the two girls until 2 a.m. on February 14th, and then it picks up again later that morning. Why was the search called off at 2 is a question I have. As the search progressed through the day, the girls were ultimately found. Both were dead, 13 and 14 years old. I believe Libby was 14, Abby was 13. Don't quote me on that though. They were found just upstream from the Mononhigh Bridge near the Deer Creek. You're going to see pictures of the scene. It was a gruesome scene. Libby was completely naked, covered in blood, with her throat cut in several places. Libby's blood was all over the ground in several places and even on one of the trees. Abby, she had on her own undershirt, but she had on Libby's sweatshirt and Libby's jeans. Abby had her own shoes on, but no socks. Her throat was also cut. The rest of the girls' clothes were found in the Deer Creek, with the exception of two things: one of LG's shoes and of Libby's shoes and Libby's cell phone. They were found underneath the body of Abby. So Libby's phone and one of her shoes was found underneath the body of Abby. Also found at the scene was a lone bullet, an unspent bullet, inches away from the bodies of Abby and Libby, specifically a Winchester .40 caliber bullet. The phone, along with the other items, were sent to be processed to see what evidence could be gathered, to see what they could find. On the phone were the last pictures taken by Libby of her and Abby, those pictures that Libby took while on the ride in Kelsey's car. There's also the videos Libby took, the video of the end of the at Mononhigh Bridge that showed the man that was following Abby, that showed the man who kidnapped Abby and Libby, the man we know as Bridge Guy. Too bad Bridge Guy isn't Richard Allen, though. As the investigation progressed, witnesses started to come forward with information. You're going to hear from three girls that were on the trail that day: Anna Spath, Rayleigh Voorhees, and Brianna Wilbur. And they were on the trail as well, taking pictures of nature with friends, laughing, joking. They stopped and took a picture at a bench just east of the Freedom Bridge, and right after that, they ran into a man along the trail and later described that male as walking with a purpose, but not very friendly. Most importantly, they're all going to testify that the man they saw on the trail that day is Bridge Guy. But no one ever says that Richard Allen is Bridge Guy. Not once in this trial that I know of from the reporting. So I haven't read the transcripts yet, but let's look for it, okay, guys? Because they keep saying Bridge Guy did it, Bridge Guy did it, Bridge Guy did it, but no one says Richard Allen is Bridge Guy. You're then going to hear from Betsy Blair. She came forward. She was on the trail that day as well. She uses the trail to exercise. She walks the loop on the trail for her exercise daily. She walked down to the Monenhigh Bridge, and when she got to the Monenhigh Bridge, she saw the male out on the first platform on the bridge. She'll testify the guy she saw is Bridge Guy from LG's video. You're then gonna hear from Sarah Carbaugh, who said that she drove east on 300 North that day. She saw a man walking along the side of the road, and that man was muddy and bloody, like he had just slaughtered a pig. And she'll tell you the man that she saw as that was Bridge Guy. She'll tell you the man that she saw was Bridge Guy. Years passed, and through the years, investigators worked on the case, tried to find additional clues. Took them 5 years to come back to Richard Allen to arrest him. As she was reviewing old reports, she came across a report by a DNR officer, Department of Natural Resources, named Dan Doolin. And in 2017, he spoke with Richard Allen and made a report. And when he spoke to Richard Allen in 2017, Richard Allen told him that he arrived at the trails at 1:30 and he was there until 3:30. And that while he was on the trail, he ran into three girls. Kathy immediately took his report to Tony Liggett, who was the detective at the time. You're going to hear Tony Liggett testify that the tip stuck with him immediately because he knew that if they could find the man that ran into the three girls, they would be able to identify Bridge Guy, and so it immediately stuck out to him. Law enforcement immediately called Richard Allen. His case just totally fell apart. Like, he's not tying it all together now anymore. Like, none of this is factual. It's all kind of like, well, this guy said or did this, and this tip really stuck with him immediately. So, like, you're just, mm, yeah, it's all speculation. Richard Allen immediately or admitted that he was on the trail on February 13th. Um, that he ran into the three girls on the trail. He also stated he was wearing a blue or black Carhartt coat, jeans, and fit the description of the man on the bridge. Also found out that he owned firearms. Investigators searched Richard Allen's house and they found a blue Carhartt jacket, several knives and box cutters, boots, and a 40 caliber gun with 40 caliber ammunition. The gun was sent to the lab and tested, and it was confirmed that the bullet at the scene was cycled through Richard Allen's gun. That's debatable. That it came from Richard Allen's gun, the bullet that was found between the two bodies of Abby and Libby. Richard Allen was brought in for a second interview. The girls were stabbed. So this is bullet. Why did he have, yeah. Anyways, Richard Allen was brought in for a second interview. This information was put in front of him. He had no explanation for how this bullet ended up between the bodies. I don't know. I don't know. The story could have ended there. Richard Allen was arrested, and while he was incarcerated, he confirmed what investigators knew that he was the one that killed Abby and Libby. And it just wasn't one admission, it was several while he was being tortured and under mind altering drugs that were given to him against his will by a psychotic true crime fan slash doctor who was injecting him with Halidol. You can't make this up, guys. Like, this is really what was going on. And the way that the state just twists the story and makes themselves the heroes, like, it's sickening. It just wasn't one admission, it was many as to why he did it. And those aren't admissions he made while he was being interrogated or being tortured or being asked questions by police. These are admissions that he told his wife, his mother, unprovoked, admissions that were freely and knowingly made, admissions that had details that only the killer would know. You're going to hear those details. For 5 years, he lived in this community. He worked in this community. He hid in plain sight. The state is confident after you hear this evidence that you will be firmly convinced that Richard Allen is the man on the bridge that kidnapped Abby and Libby and then intentionally murdered them. That Richard Allen is the man on the bridge and that he used his gun to gain power over the two girls and force them down the hill. The words that he uttered to those girls, which is just ridiculous because that's not what or no, that is, he does say that, sorry. He does say that, but it also, like, we know that the film, the audio, things have been altered and we don't know where it comes in. It sounds like he would be closer than where he would have been. Yeah, it's just a lot of it just doesn't make any sense. But anyways, um, where did I leave off? I lost my place. Richard Allen is the bridge guy. He forced them down the hill and he was going to have his way with them, but he was interrupted and we're going to talk to you and tell you about that interruption and after which he forced them to cross the creek and he killed them. The evidence will show the last face the girls saw before their throats were slit was Richard Allen's face. What evidence shows you that? State believes that you'll be firmly convinced that he is the one that killed Abby and Libby. Thank you, Judge. So, relatively short compared to this next one, which the court says Mr. Baldwin. So, as you know, Andy Baldwin will be doing the opening for the defense. All right. Richard Allen is truly innocent. Sorry, let me start that over. I had to pause to do my timestamps, so sorry about that. Let me start that over. So, Mr. Baldwin says Richard Allen is truly innocent. Truly innocent. And when a man is truly innocent, there will be reasonable doubt from the evidence and from the lack of evidence. It may be hard to believe what you hear, but we asked you to wait because in this case you're going to find out that the evidence and the lack of evidence shows that Richard Allen is actually innocent and that therefore there is reasonable doubt. We want the truth to come out in this courtroom for the families and for you most importantly. So, I'm going to preview that evidence you're going to be looking at over the next few weeks. It starts out you're going to find out that this case and the investigation was messed up from the beginning to the middle and as recently as the last couple of days. The beginning, you'll find out the evidence was lost. Is gone. Poof. Steve Mullen was in charge of that evidence. We're talking about the important evidence that happens right after they start an investigation. We're talking about evidence of interviews of key witnesses that are gone forever, and Richard Allen and his defense team will never, ever get to see that evidence, and neither will you. We're talking about evidence that they don't even know who they interviewed because they didn't even bother to write down the names of the people that they interviewed. We're talking about days and days and days of evidence right after the murders. And that wasn't all. Then a month later, they lost more evidence. From April the 29th to June the 2nd, they lost interview after interview that they will never see. Richard Allen will never have the benefit of looking at, and neither will you. You'll find out that the defense didn't even learn about this stuff until very late. We had been asking for it. That's the beginning. In the middle, you're going to find out that the state of Indiana kicked out the FBI. They were having some turf wars. You'll hear about that. Kick them out. I didn't know you could just kick the FBI out of your state. And that's going to be a problem. You're going to find out because they not only kicked out the FBI, but their digital forensic people. You're going to find out that their digital forensic people had been given Liberty German's phone, the extractions from that, and before the FBI had a chance to talk to the state police about their findings, if they had any, they were kicked out. And that is going to be a major problem. You'll find out here in a moment. And then more recently, 2 days ago, you're going to find out that law enforcement is scrambling a bit. Some of you, on the one panel, I didn't talk about it, but on the other, I did. There is hair found in Abby's hand, a strand of hair around her fingers with a root, and DNA that can be extracted from the root, and DNA was extracted from that root. And the DNA analysis, her name is Bozanovsky, Stacy Bozanovsky, the analyst, I guess. She will be testifying that hair. It might be from a relative of Libby. We know it's not Libby's hair. Kelsey has long blonde hair, which is how the hair is described. So I don't know. I'm just saying. We know that it's not Libby's hair. The DNA from it's not Libby's hair because the DNA is not from Libby. We know that it's not Abby's DNA. It's a female hair. And all we need to know, whether it's a family member or not, you will find all we need. Stacy will tell you is to test the mom or the grandma or the sister of Libby. And once we do that, we will know whether it's a family member or somebody else, and it could be either. And after I give my mini opening, they scrambled because and so the mini opening that he gave to the jurors probably when they were sworn in. So the prosecution scrambled after he gave his mini opening because in 7 years they never turned over the sister or the mother's DNA over to the lab to find out whose hair that might be. That's even now. I hope that they get the results back of the DNA so the truth can come out in this courtroom. Truth, believe it or not, can come out in a phone. These phones, they don't lie. The data, the forensic data on these phones don't lie. It doesn't cheat. It doesn't have emotion. You're going to hear all this. The data is hard, and the data is the data is the data. And when you find out what is on Libby's phone, is what I'm talking about. The phone that was found under Abby, their case is going to start to fall apart right in front of your eyes. The man. There's a couple of guys from the state police who are very nice fellows. Their names are Brian Bunner and Chris Cecil. You're going to like them, I think. They are in charge of analyzing the phone dumps. You'll get the phone dumps and extractions, things like that. They are in charge and have been in charge of understanding the data, the hard data that doesn't lie off of Libby's phone. And what you're going to find out is sadly, they are ill equipped to understand that data. We'll talk about that in a moment. Chris Cecil will tell you that the data from the phone dump is accurate and reliable, and we're happy about that because this data it will be incredibly important in your deliberations and as you follow the case evidence. Well, I think it's important that I tell you what the state's theory is. They kind of previewed it and they didn't do a great job, but yeah, he kind of went over it in very brief detail. And what I want to do is I'm gonna ask that they be held to their theory because I think they're gonna have to change their theory after the case starts evolving in front of you, okay? And that's important, and we're gonna pay attention to that because this happened in the Karen Reed case. It happens when the state doesn't have a solid case against their defendant, and when the defense starts to present something, their case falls apart, and this is going to happen. Although he was still convicted, so go figure. Their theory is that Richard Allen will strike that. We'll start with Libby and Abby. Libby and Abby, Abby and Libby, were on the ground in the woods at 4 o'clock. At the very latest, 4 o'clock, they were deceased and on the ground at 4 o'clock on the 13th. That's a Monday. It's a Monday, the 13th. And at 5 o'clock, their bodies didn't move. 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., midnight, 1 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m. Bodies are still there, according to this is their theory. 6 a.m., noon, those bodies didn't move. They were there from the 13th, at least 4 o'clock, they will say. Probably they're going to say more like 3:30, all the way up until the time when the bodies were recovered. That's their theory. The phone, Libby's phone, they're going to say was under that body, was under Abby's body at 3:30 p.m., 4 p.m. on Monday the 13th, 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 8 p.m., midnight, 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 6 in the morning, all the way up until the bodies were recovered around noon on the 14th, Tuesday the 14th. That's that's what their theory is. That phone never moves. That's their theory. Hard data. Richard Allen. What's their theory about Richard Allen? Their theory about Richard Allen is that he arrived at the trails and parked at the CPS lot. You're going to hear a lot about the CPS lot. I got to try to recreate what you're going to find. So, as you're heading down 300 North, that's the road that takes you to the CPS lot. Sorry, I got a hair that one of my own hairs that's sticking to my lips. Sorry. You're going to hear a lot about the CPS lot, which is one place where cars park when they want to get on the trail. And Mears lot that you just heard about is a little bit further down. So, as you're driving down 300 North, this is the CPS lot. You can park there. Then you can cut over to the Monon High, the Monon Trail. It's about 100 yards or something. And so you're a little bit back further on the trail, or you can continue to drive and head into the Mears entrance here. And now you're about halfway down the trail if you're following. And the trail kind of runs parallel to 300 North. And then you go down to about 50 yards and you'll be at the trail. And what the state's theory is that Richard Allen drove this way, which is not a normal way that he would ever drive. And you will learn about that. It won't even make sense that he drove that way. But that's what they need that to be in that case because you'll find out why. But he drove this way and then parked past the Mears entrance and parked at the CPS entrance at 1:30. This is their theory. And at 1:30, 2 o'clock, 2:30, 3 o'clock. Now, think about what's going on at this time in their theory. Abby and Libby are being abducted and murdered. 3 o'clock, 3:30. Richard Allen's car, they say, is parked right here at the CPS lot 3:45, 4 o'clock. Their theory is that Richard Allen's car is parked and then sometime around 4, after 4 o'clock, Richard Allen leaves. That's their theory. You'll also find out that their theory is that once Richard Allen, and this is important, once Richard Allen left, he didn't take their phone. He didn't take Libby's phone, hard data on it, and he never came back to the crime scene. And they're going to say that's also important. He never came back to the crime scene. And they're going to say that that's all going to be important. So that's what they say, Richard Allen. It's what happened with Richard Allen, with the phone, and with Abby and Libby. What is the defense's theory based upon the evidence now? So that was what the state is going to say happened. We think this is what the state's going to say. This is what we're going to tell you, what the evidence is going to show in our case. Let me go through the evidence and tell you what the defense theory is based upon that evidence. Richard Allen was never on that trail at the same time with those girls. All this identification business, these girls, and all of the list of who that is, you're going to say even Rayleigh Voorhees and those people they're talking about, some guy that's 5'11, doesn't really meet the description of a 5'5 Richard Allen. You'll make your own decisions what on the value of their testimony. Richard Allen was gone by 1:30. Had been on the bridge walking toward on the trail toward the bridge at, 12:30, 1. He's gone by 1:30. Now, now we know for a fact and you will learn from this evidence that his car is gone by 2:15 p.m., okay? Remember that think about the video is the 43-second video is at 2:13, the one that was supposedly taken, or the one that was taken on Libby's phone, the bridge guy video was at 2:13 p.m. But the defense is saying that Richard Allen's car was gone by 2:15. His car is gone out of the CPS lot, and if his car is gone, Richard is gone. And how do you know that? What is the evidence going to be about that? Betsy Blair, you've heard her name a second ago. She is going to be an incredibly important witness for all of you. Betsy Blair, you're going to like her. Betsy Blair is going to testify that when she drove by the CPS lot at 2:15, and we know that she drove by the CPS lot right around that time because there's a camera that shows her between the Mears lot. I'm sorry, this is the CPS lot and the Mears lot. Right in between, there's a camera off the Hoosier Harvest store. We've heard a ton about that too. And that's going to be another important thing that you guys are going to be hearing about. The Hoosier Harvest store will help give us some tent poles of when things happen. And so we know from Betsy Blair, you're going to find this out when Betsy Blair traveled past that camera, that 30 seconds or so later, she's going to be at the CPS lot. And when she testifies, you will hear her tell you that what vehicle she saw at the CPS lot at 2:15. Again, remember what their story or their theory of is happening at 2:15. Richard Allen has abducted the girls already, so his car would be here. Well, was his car there? Here's what Betsy Blair will testify to. Quote, my dad used to, when I was a kid, had a Comet. She thought it was a Ford Comet, but it was a Mercury Comet in the 60s. It's one of those old-timey cars, You see them out on the road sometimes and you're like, whoa, look at that car. And it's very angular. It's got real crisp angles and lines. And she looked at it and she had a blast from the past. Wow, that's the look, or that looks just like mine. That's how she remembered it. Richard Allen's car that they say he was driving was a 2014 Ford Focus. Is that not right? That must be, he must have said the wrong year or something. Looks nothing like a Comet. You will see. That's the vehicle that Richard Allen was not driving. I'm sorry, that's the vehicle Richard Allen was driving, a Ford Focus. But somebody else apparently was. What? That's the vehicle that Richard Allen was not driving, but somebody else apparently was. So Richard Allen was not driving a Comet. Okay, that was a weird way to say it. Richard Allen was gone by that time. That's why Betsy Blair did not see Richard Allen's car. She saw her Mercury, something that looked like a Mercury, and she will testify to that. And you will hear Steve Mullen, when he was asked about it, if he's consistent, he will say, I don't know how to account for that. There's reasonable doubt on this case. Well, what does the evidence show about what happened to the girls? What evidence is there that we can have to understand what happened with these girls? What will you be seeing in this case? Well, I think you're going to hear from even today from Becky Patty, who's the grandma. She is the first witness, and she and Derek German, the dad, they all lived together. You're going to find out kind of what they were doing early in the day on Saturday. I'm sorry, on Monday, the 14th. This is the 13th, Monday, the 13th. They might even tell you what they were doing on Saturday and Sunday, but they're definitely going to tell you what they were doing on Monday the 13th. They had breakfast, they talked a little bit, and then at some point in time, Kelsey German, who's now Kelsey Siebert, will drive Abby and Libby to the trail. And I think she's going to testify today. She testifies second, but it's going to be the next day in order when this took place. And we know because of the Hoosier Harvest camera that Kelsey dropped them off at the Mears lot, then drove past the camera, and that's about at 1:49 p.m. roughly. So the girls were dropped off at about 1:47, which is going to be about a few minutes before or after Betsy Blair got there. You'll find that out. Betsy Blair and the girls, they were following. The girls were basically came in right after Betsy. And then Kelsey drove this way. She's on camera. And we know then that what time the girls got there. Then you will find out that the girls walked down to the trail to the bridge. And the trail is straight. And then when you get, it's like trails like in maybe in your own community, you'll notice that there's asphalt and it's maybe, I don't know, this wide. He indicates how wide. I don't know what he does. And then he says, and people are walking up and down, exercising or whatnot. And you go down the trail and then you get to a point and there's a bridge. This bridge that Mr. McLeland was talking, big scary bridge, and it is. You'll see photos of it. And when you get to that bridge, you can make a choice. Back then, it was easier than it is now, than that you could get on the bridge. They've done things now since this happened to try to close off the bridge, but I don't think it's entirely closed. You could still get on it if you were a kid and really wanted to. But anyways, and when you get to the bridge, you make a choice. Back then, it was easier that you could get on the bridge and walk forward and just go straight to the other end. And those girls got on the bridge probably around 2:05. That is what the evidence will show. And Mr. McLeland is correct. When they got on the bridge at 2:07, and by the way, they passed Betsy Blair, you're going to find that. You're also going to find that. Betsy Blair will say, as she was traveling this way, the girls were traveling this way, and they passed one another. And the girls got on the bridge and then went down here. Now, the bridge is long and high. I'm on the bridge now, and this is what you're going to see. The bridge is it's very long and it's dangerous. As Mr. McLeland said, there's holes in it. It is the kind of thing that teenagers would do, probably, and the girls walking on it. I absolutely would have done this as a teenager. Today, it would terrify the crap out of me as a teenager. No problem. When they were about close to halfway across the bridge, one third of the way, one half of the way, you will see that Libby was ahead over here, and she turned around and she took a photo of Abby heading this way, heading to the south end of the bridge where the abduction happens. And you'll see Abby there, and that happened at 2:07. So we kind of have an idea of where the girls were at 2:07. 2:13 is when the abduction happened, so we know that at 2:13 they're at the end of the bridge. So what happened then? Well, that's caught on video, and this video we will watch, and what you're gonna see on that video is it's not very panoramic. You're not going to be able to see what everything is and where everything is and who is there because she's holding her phone kind of downwards. You don't see really people's faces and whatnot. And you do hear this voice, girls down the hill. Police have to admit that the guy on the video, you don't see his mouth moving. You're not going to be able to be sure that he's the guy that's even uttering those words. You're not going to be able to know whether there are more than one person at the end of the bridge. So, what will you see in that video? And again, let me describe the end of the bridge for you, and you will see that in evidence. If I'm walking all the way to the end of the bridge, like the girls, Abby and Libby did, you have a choice, and you're going to see this in the video. You can go left, go right, and it looks like on the video the girls head this way, okay? And if that's the bridge and you head this way, there's one way down. That's down a steep incline about 30 feet down the hill, okay? I don't think the evidence they're going to be able to show that the girls actually went down the hill or not. They may have. The evidence may show that, in your opinion, or it may show that they went straight, or the evidence may show that they ended up going down the lesser of an incline on the other side of the bridge. So one side's the 30-foot steep incline, and another is a lesser incline on the other side of the bridge. And the bridge is about that wide. There's a lesser graded slope that takes you down. Both, though, the more steep side and the less steep side take you down and funnel you down to an access road down about 30 feet away. An access road, some feet, or some might call it a driveway. What you're going to hear is about a guy named Brad Weber. This is his property, and this is Brad Weber's way to get to his property. He had two ways. There's that way and another way to get to Weber's house from this access road. The one way would be you get. Let me go back over here and to where the bridge is. He must be pointing to pictures and stuff because we don't see what he's doing. So to get to the Brad Weber's house from the access road, the one way would be you get. Let me go back over here to where the bridge is on the right side where the girls were, and you go down the hill, and then that access road goes under the bridge and it goes that way, and it goes the way up to Brad Weber's house. So you can imagine that under the bridge. So basically, this access road, this bridge leads to an access road to Brad Weber's house. Inevitably, they kind of have to pass the access road. So, just an interesting tidbit. So you can imagine that under the bridge, the state of Indiana will not be able to disprove that there was a vehicle down there or that there were other people down there. And we happen to believe that the evidence will suggest that those girls may have gotten into a vehicle at that point in time. There is not going to be strong evidence about what happened at that point. I'm just telling you that. You can just take from the information though, from the hard data on Libby's phone and some other information and data that you may see from other sources. Here's what we do know. Libby's phone was connecting to the tower and receiving text messages. Where are you? What's going on? Voicemails, telephone calls, connecting to the tower all the way up until 5:44 p.m. It's going to be an important time frame for you all, the 5:45 p.m. At 5:45 p.m., that phone no longer is connected to the tower. From 44 p.m., no connection to the tower all the way until 4:33 a.m. when it is reconnected to the tower where the phone came back into the area where it connected to that tower again. So for about 12 hours, close to 10 hours, then that phone did not connect to the tower. This is the phone, by the way, that was, by their theory, under Abby's body during the entire time. So it didn't move, according to the state. It's been under her body this whole time, and their bodies haven't moved, but yet we've got activity on the phone. It's just odd. You'll also find that after 4 o'clock, when they say Richard Allen never came back to the scene, he left and never came back. Their theory, he didn't take the phone with him. That's what they're going to tell you. That after 4 o'clock, human hands handled that phone. Richard Allen was not at home and he never came back. That's the evidence. You will also hear something about what are called exigent circumstance pings. You may have seen these on television. This is on movies and things like that where somebody is lost and they call AT&T in this case and said, "Hey, will you try to see if the phone's in that area?" And that happened here. and consistent with what we know from the phone itself. The last time that that phone connected, according to the exigent circumstance ping, the last time Libby's phone connected with the tower on the 13th, Monday, the 13th, was what time? 5:44 p.m. That will be something that you will hear. Every 15 minutes, that phone was pinged, and every 15 minutes, it was showing it's not connecting with the tower. The last time she did, 5:44. So at 7 o'clock p.m., 7:15 p.m., 7:30 p.m., these aren't exact times. They're at different times, but it was roughly in 15-minute increments. That phone is not connecting with the tower. Another 10 o'clock, you will see, or you will find out that Steve Mullen, he's a law enforcement officer that will be witness in this case, and uh, he's contacted he contacted law enforcement, contacted a guy named Mitch Blocher with the state police. Mitch Blocher was the guy who knows about phone pings and how to analyze them, and Steve Mullen wrote up a report about what Mitch Blocher concluded. And he concluded either the phone has not been connecting with the tower since about 5:44 p.m., so either the phone is no longer in working condition or it's out of the area. So it's either not working or it's out of the area. Those are the two. Well, we know, and you're going to find out that the phone was in working order when it was found. It was in working order. So take that one down. So then that means it's out of the area. It's left with the phone. It's left with the phone with out of the area. That was a weird way of saying that. It's left with the phone is out of the area. The phone that was supposed to be under Abby's body. So again, you will learn that midnight, 12:15 a.m., 1 a.m., the phone is not connecting to the tower. And then at 4:33 a.m., we're not going to be able to tell you, and I don't think the evidence will. Nobody will ever know exactly when that phone, where it was, when it connected or did connect with the tower. Of course, the defense is saying that the phone was out and that it came back in. But wait, what? The defense is saying that it left the area, came back in. What we will tell you is that at some point in time after that phone came back to the area, somebody brought those two girls back to where they ultimately were found, and that was probably after 4:33 a.m. Remember, I was like, well, why did the search stop at 2? So there was enough time for this to happen, I think. And you're going to find out at 4:33 a.m. You know, when you're in a building and you try to text somebody and there's too many walls and you walk outside and the text, you start getting texts and texts and all the texts start at 4:33 a.m. 15 text messages and then other text messages matriculated, populated into that phone once it connected with the tower. You're going to find that out. And at some point in time, and I don't think the evidence will be able to, at some point in time after that, after the thing with the phone, those girls, somebody killed those girls and somebody put that phone under the body and where it was found around noon a few hours later. We are obviously telling you that the evidence will be that these girls were not where they were found on the 14th. They were not there on the 13th, which makes it even more reasonable to think that when you know that the search team was all up in that area and didn't find anything the first night. We are obviously telling you that the evidence will be that those girls were not where they were found on the 14th. They were not there on the 13th. And this will be a big help. But is there other evidence out there that would also suggest that the girls were not there on the 13th? Yes. So you're going to find out that there was a search party assembled very quickly. It wasn't in Libby's nature, I think, that Becky Petty will tell you this. It wasn't in Libby's nature to be late like she was. And so the family, very close family, they got together right away and said, this isn't right. We got to do something. So you're going to find out that they sprung into action very quickly, and they got a search party together, and it grew and it grew. Facebook and stuff like that. They got on Facebook and said, "Hey, these girls are missing." And you're going to hear from former Fire Chief Starrett, and he's going to tell you about his part of the search party. There were 4 or 5, maybe 6 guys, and here's where they searched for the girls on the 13th, when those bodies, according to their theory, should be over there. So they searched in the area where the bodies were later found. If this is well, I think this end of the bridges, well, I think this end of the bridge is where it happened. The bridge is where it happened. I love court reporters. Spelling matters, punctuation matters, the things you do matter, the way you write matters. Anyways, moving on. If this is where the bodies were, where the girls were abducted, I'm sorry, where the girls were abducted, and you can go down that hill, Starrett and his people that were with him, they searched on this side. The bodies, by the way, were over there. This is where they were, he indicates. So he's definitely pointing to a map or some aerial footage or aerial photo or something. Starrett and his people searched over here. And then they came over here and they searched over here for 4 hours in the area. And the girls were across the creek. And one thing you guys are going to find out is it's not very far from the end of the bridge where the girls' bodies were found across the creek. It's kind of like that way from the edge. So if they went down the hill, here's the bodies. They were found that way, probably less than 300 yards. It's about 800 and some odd feet, not very far. And that's at an angle. And what Starrett will tell you is my people that I was with, and they were spread out and they were looking on this side. Well, they weren't on the side that the bodies were, but what what did they see on the side where the bodies were? People with flashlights on that side. Oh, okay. So they weren't on that side, but people with flashlights were, apparently. People with flashlights. And not one person saw any bodies over there because the defense theory is that the bodies weren't there. They were somewhere else. And I think they were probably still alive at that point. And you're going to find out a little bit about that area, and not a lot. A little. Probably a lot more than you want, maybe. And the area where the girls were found, it's flat. It's a natural place for these people to be walking and the flashlights. Now, Starrett, I don't want to oversell. Starrett's not going to be able to tell you that the flashlights were where the bodies were for sure because he doesn't know. But he just saw flashlights over there. You're also going to find out that Mr. McLeland talked about it a moment ago. There's clothing in the creek, okay? And that's going to be important. One thing you're going to find out is the people that were searching, they were preparing for the worst. That maybe the girls were in the creek. Maybe they were floating or on top of the water. So many of the people were going along the creek bed and looking for the girls. And there is aerial footage of one of the news stations that catches law enforcement doing things in the creek, and it almost looks like there might be a body or two floating in the creek that morning, but unconfirmed. But I do have suspicions that the girls were even found in the spot that they were found. They might have been moved there. So this also furthers that suspicion when they were saying that the investigators were preparing for the worst and thinking that the girls might be in the creek floating in the water. When I think maybe they might have been. Now, if the state's theory were true that clothing of the girls were found on the 14th, should be in the creek where the girls or where the people are searching with their flashlights, and nobody saw anything on the 13th in the creek. So nobody found the girls' clothing on the 13th if it was in the creek where they said it was. He says it was only until later that they saw the clothing in the creek. As excuse me, as an additional piece of evidence that you will have to show that the girls weren't there on the 13th. Is there anything else? Yes, Jerry Holman. Jerry effing Holman. He's the worst. Jerry Holman will tell you that from where the girls were found to the bridge, you can hear voices. And around the time that their theory is that Richard Allen abducted these girls, there would be people walking on the bridge. Four people. You'll hear from them: Daniel Pearson, Shelby Hicks, Cheyenne Mill, Duncan. Two of them went to the end of the bridge where it's really, again, the bodies are over that way. Two of them were at the end of the bridge, and you're very close. I think that I would call it close to where the bodies were. Again, none of them heard anything. No screams, no voices, no wrestling, nothing right around the time that they say Richard Allen was abducting these girls. I mean, if anybody killed those girls, the evidence would show on the 13th. Just for that reason alone, there was no sound of anything. So, just that reason alone, there's reasonable doubt there. The evidence will be those girls were gone, like out of the area. They had been moved, they were or taken. There might be other evidence out there that you guys see individually, but this is the type of case where a jury sees and picks up on the things that we don't see. That always happens, especially on longer cases. You guys might pick up, so keep your eyes open and your ears because you're going to see some things as well, I think. Well, I know I've been going on long and I could go on with this much longer. I think based on what we know about this case, yes. But this is important stuff, and I'm going to wait, or I'm going to try and sit down as quickly as I can. But I do want to talk about what I think the state thinks and what they say under oath about bullets, and we'll call it confessions and the timeline. I want to go through those very briefly. Confessions. You have this and the other evidence I've talked about, and none of that stuff matters. So they can put up, and I expect that they're going to put up person after person after person, and video after video after video, and audio after audio after audio of all these confessions of an innocent man. But the hard evidence, it doesn't matter that the hard evidence shows otherwise. And what you're going to find out, you're going to see these videos, and we're going to show you the videos of Richard Allen in his cell and how this guy was taken out of his house, as I said in the mini opening, away from his wife of 30 plus years to a prison where he is standing in his tiny little cell with a bed about that high on the ground about 2 feet from the toilet, watched 24 hours under surveillance, under 24 hours a day, told that he's a baby killer. He went in there fragile to begin with. You're going to see some video that is upsetting, and it should be upsetting. Even the video of him talking to his stepdad saying, "Don't give me any money, don't hire me a lawyer." You're going to find out even in November, within 2 weeks of him being at Westville, he said, "Maybe I'll just admit to all of it so you guys won't have to suffer." That was at the beginning. When these confessions happened, it was after close to 6 months, 5 to 6 months later, after he had endured what he had endured, confessing to shooting those girls in the back when they weren't shot. The things I told you in the mini opening, you take those confessions for what you think they are worth when you compare it to the other evidence. And that's what we ask you to do. But what about the bullets? Well, you're going to hear from some psychologists, Dr. Grazian and Dr. Westcott, and they are our experts, and they're going to tell you that the ingredients were there for false confessions with what Richard Allen had endured. What about the bullet? The magic bullet, one witness called it. Here's what you're gonna find out, first of all, unless I see something I haven't seen before and maybe even just missed if it existed, as a just a kind of maybe these photos exist, I haven't seen them, we'll see. There's the magic bullet that is in the ground, they say, right here. This is, he's saying there were no video, no photos or, um, chain of custody evidence of this bullet that they found in the ground. And there's no photos of it ever taken of them collecting it or it being in the ground, finding it there, nothing. He says there's a magic bullet there that's in the ground, they say right here, and you see some photos of that bullet as it's in the ground. And maybe they will produce them, but I haven't seen them. And you see some photos of that bullet. What? He just said there were no photos. There's not a video of this importance. This is one of the main pieces of evidence, the video. There is no video or photographs of that bullet being taken out of the ground and photographed from that angle and that angle and that angle and that angle. Just a photo of the bullet in the ground and then later on a different, a bullet, a different photograph of a bullet at the lab where it was tested. But in between, I didn't see anything else. So what else? Well, this kind of feels like he's just kind of throwing it together. I mean, he's hitting all the good points, I think, but the asking the questions like, so what else? Well, you're going to find out about this bullet, and law enforcement commonly use 40 caliber bullets. Guns that use 40 caliber bullets, even Sig Sauers are very common. And if there's gun people on the jury, they may have heard of a Sig Sauer. That's the gun they found at Richard Allen's house, a very common gun. Law enforcement use Sig Sauers, 40 caliber bullets, so you would think, okay, let's test and find out whether as police were walking down the area, did they drop a bullet? Let's see if it happened. Very possible. And hey, I want every police officer that was at the crime scene walking around. I want to know what kind of gun they had and if they're missing any bullets, that kind of thing. You would think that that would happen, but it did not happen. I want every 40 caliber handgun that police had tested. You would think that would happen, but it did not happen. You're also going to find out that Brad Weber, remember that guy? He's the guy whose driveway goes all the way up to the house, right? He had a 40 caliber Sig Sauer in his vehicle and that handgun was tested and it was not excluded as a weapon, okay? Meaning it could have been him. Could have been coming from his weapon. Here's what you're going to find out about the test itself, and we have an expert named Dr. Warren, and he's going to be very, very critical of the way this this testing process was handled. Here's the way it was handled. This is what you will find out. The bullet that they got out of the ground had markings on it that you can see. The bullet, this is important. Mr. McLeland talked about this a little bit. It was never shot. It had never been shot out of a gun. It had been cycled through a gun. Does, does it make sense? And it had sufficient markings, the bullet did. So what they did is law enforcement took a pristine bullet and put it into Richard Allen's gun, and then they cycled it through to recreate how the bullet came when they found it. And when they took the pristine bullet after it had been cycled and they looked at it, some of the markings were insufficient. They just couldn't be seen well enough. And they're trying to compare that to this bullet that they did have sufficient markings. That's the starting point of the problems with the bullet. So what did they have to do? They had to law enforcement, they really wanted this to work out. So they fired the bullet so there's more pressure on it, and the tools and the things inside can show more markings. So now they're comparing a bullet that was fired out of a weapon now uh, to one that has not been fired. Now it has sufficient markings on here, at least to see. They're comparing that bullet to the bullet that was found on the ground that had insufficient markings or that had sufficient markings. Now, this bullet and has insufficient sorry, this bullet has sufficient markings, and now they're going to tell you, oh, yes, they're the same bullet. It's comparing apples and oranges. That's what you're going to hear. By the way, and look at that, you all have eyeballs. When you see these comparison photos, your own eyeballs will tell you that they don't match. Your own eyeballs. You don't need an expert, folks, because you have eyes. You'll also hear things. I don't want to get too muddled down. You're going to also hear about subclass. Any gun, let's say a Sig Sauer that fires a weapon, it's going to have similar tool markings. That's what they call it on each individual bullet, but they are going to be similar subclasses, and there's some of that going on here too. That these bullets are consistent in some ways because they came from, a gun that was similar. In these subclasses, Mr. Rosie will be handling all of the ballistics. He will be telling you why that is important and why it shows that this magic bullet is of really no value. You will also hear from Melissa Oberg, who is the state's witness. She no longer works. I'm sorry. I know people might have to go to the restroom. I'm going as quickly as I can, guys. I'm really sorry. Miss Melissa Oberg. She will tell you that she's no longer with the Indiana State Police. She's the one that tested these bullets and is the one that's interpreting the evidence of these bullets. And you'll hear her say this. When I did this over 1100, 1300 times, and when people, I was never wrong. Now, the people that I work with, I would check their work out and their work, they are wrong. But I was never wrong. Really? Okay. Melissa, I was never wrong. Oberg will be testifying for the state. Can't wait. That's the person that's interpreting this bullet. You'll hear her testify. They've got a magic bullet, and we have got other evidence. I'm gonna quickly go through this timeline, and then I'm sorry, this is important, but we'll talk about Betsy Blair again. Betsy Blair arrives so the third thing that they can try to say that they have is the timeline on their side, and they cannot. The evidence will not support that. The timeline. Betsy Blair gets to the trails around 1:49 p.m. right before Kelsey drops off the girls, right? So she drops them off at the Mears entrance. Betsy goes onto the trail. She walks the trail. She gets to where the high bridge starts. When you see all the evidence, this will start to make sense to you. It's hard to conceptualize it right now, but the trail ends and there the bridge begins. And when she got to where the bridge begins, she saw with her own eyes, from about 50 feet away, a guy who they're claiming is Bridge Guy. What they failed to tell you, the state, just a moment ago, is that the person that Betsy Blair observed was in his early 20s, maybe 30s. He had brown, fluffy hair, or poofy, as she called it. Richard Allen has kept his hair short since 1989. His wife will tell you about it. He was in the military. He likes it short, and he obviously ain't 20 years old. Betsy, Richard, Rick is short. Betsy Blair did not say that the guy was short that she saw. That's the guy that they say that is the killer. So now one person has described Bridge Guy or the killer as a short man. The timeline will be a problem. Oh wait, I skipped something here. Sorry. Betsy Blair did not say that the guy was short. That's the guy that they say is the killer. Betsy Blair, something inaudible. I told you about the car that Betsy Blair saw. Doesn't fit the description at all of Richard Allen's car. Totally different. That timeline will be a problem. Sarah Carbow. She sh see one way to kind of easily understand that. So, one way to easily understand that, who these witnesses are, and I know it's hard right now, but Betsy Blair is at the beginning. I'm seeing them like bookends. Betsy Blair at the beginning, the person that she saw that they say is Richard Allen, the 20-some-year-old guy with the brown poofy hair. That's at the beginning. Sarah Carbow is at the very end. They're bookends. They're supposed to be the same guy, according to their theory. So, this Sarah Carbow, who did she see? Well, she's going to testify. I think you're going to like her, but her story just is completely inconsistent. That's what you'll see. In 2017, in June of 2017, she was interviewed and she saw this guy that she saw, and they failed to tell you this guy that she saw had a tan jacket on and was muddy. 2019. 2 years later, after the video's been out, photos have been out, her story is now 2 years later. No, well, she didn't say no. She just said the guy I saw had a blue jacket on and was bloody. Now he was muddy and bloody, like a pig had, like he had slaughtered a pig. Her story's completely changed, and you'll have to take her testimony for what you think it's worth. But if Betsy Blair did not see Richard Allen, then their theory is falling apart, and you can conclude that there is reasonable doubt that she saw Richard Allen, and you'll know what to do. Find him not guilty. If Sarah Carbow did not see Richard Allen or you don't trust your testimony, then that will be reasonable doubt. And if they didn't see the person they describe are two different people. They're saying it's the same person, Richard Allen. Their timeline will not work. In the home stretch here, other stuff that's important, this is what I've labeled it DNA. Richard Allen, no DNA at the scene, not connected in any way. Social media on Richard Allen, no connection to the girls, no connection to the scene, no connection to any of that business. Forensic data, none of that connecting Richard Allen to anything. Talked about the hair on Abby's hand or in Abby's hand, and just 7 years. Really, I mean, that's what you're going to find out. It's taken them 7 years to figure out whose hair is on her hand, whether it's family or not. They're scrambling right now. Here's another thing you're going to find out. Dr. Kaur is the guy who conducted the forensic pathology. He's the forensic pathologist who conducted these autopsies. He's going to tell you that it looks like there were two blades used in the girl's necks, a serrated blade. Isn't there a lot of stuff here? A serrated blade and a non-serrated blade. And they're going to tell you that Richard Allen claims that he killed those girls with a box cutter at some point. Serrated blade and a non-serrated blade. That could indicate two people is what the defense will tell you. Two different people using two different knives. There's evidence of that, and that's what the evidence is. Two people or more. I'm not even talking about the crime scene. I'm not going to do that to you. I think we all need a break. But when you see the crime scene, you're going to understand that it is highly unlikely that one person could have done everything that was done to those girls and surrounding and around those girls. It is a very bizarre scene, these sticks laid across the girls. The court interrupts him during his opening statement. There was no objection or anything, but the court just interrupts him and says, "Mr. Baldwin, with all due respect, you are very closely and are arguing the evidence. This is not argument. This is opening statement, sir. I've given you lots of leeway. Move on, please." Mr. Baldwin says, "Thank you. There were sticks on those girls. It is a scene that you will see, and you will have to make a decision about, can one person do that? Well, you're going to find out from the evidence that they didn't think that one person could do all of that until Richard Allen was arrested. Who's they? Tobe Lesenby, the sheriff then. He thought not one. It's going to take more than one person to do all that. Who else? Tony Liggett. You need more than one person, and there might be other people, other law enforcement that get up and testify that it was more than one person and that it would take more than one person. Please wait. Richard Allen is innocent. He's really innocent." And the court says, "You may call your first witness, Mr. McLeland," the judge says, and they're going to call Becky Patty. but we will do that in on Monday's stream. So I'm going to try to do these nightly. May or may not be every day just because I have health issues and whatever. But I'm going to try to do try to do a video, even if it's just a short one to get through the testimony. But there you have it. That is the opening statements for both the state and the defense, and we even had some jury instructions there from Judge Gull. So thank you guys. Please make sure you are subscribed, hit that like button, share, do all the YouTubey things, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye now.